Psalm 137. By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down and wept when we remembered Zion. Upon the willows in the midst of it, we hung our harps. For there our captors demanded of us songs, and our tormentors mirth, saying, "Sing to us one of the songs of Zion." How can we sing the Lord's song in a foreign land? If I forget you, O Jerusalem, may my right hand forget all her skill. May my tongue cling to the roof of my mouth. If I do not remember you, if I do not exalt Jerusalem above my chief joy. Remember, O Yahweh, against the sons of Edom, the day of Jerusalem, who said, raise it to its very foundation. That's raise, R-A-Z-E, like razor, so flatten it, shave it down to nothing. O daughter of Babylon, you devastated one, how blessed will be the one who repays you with the recompense with which you have repaid us. How blessed will be the one who seizes and dashes your little ones against the rock. All right, so what I'm going to do on this one is not the same as what I do on normal Monday morning Gospels, where we take the Gospel, we take a psalm, we find the Gospel in it, and then give you a little something for Monday to keep you focused on, on Christ and on the Gospel during your work week. This one, I just kind of want to walk through quickly and do a little bit of exegesis. I just want to go through, see what it says, because this is more of our daily experience than we probably realize. The reason is because the things of the world tend to numb us, and it's tough for us to remember sometimes that we are the exiles, man. We're not where we are created to be. So in verse 1, it says, by the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down and we wept when we remembered Zion. So they were in Babylon, they were in exile because they had sinned, and God allowed Babylon to come in and pull the people of Judah, the Jewish people, out of the kingdom of Judah, away from Jerusalem, away from the temple. They flattened the temple, and so now God's people were in Babylon, a sinful pagan city where all kinds of theological abominations were happening. A lot of the paganism, in fact, almost all of the paganism that you and I are familiar with, has its roots in either Egyptian paganism or Babylonian paganism. So all of the astrology, that's Babylonian stuff. A lot of the worship of the divine feminine and earth worship, that's Babylonian stuff. Egyptian also, but this was an evil land, and they were in exile. And so there by the river, the great, proof of prosperity, the Euphrates River in Babylon, modern day Iraq, they just plopped down, had nothing left. There they sat down and wept, and it says that they hung up their harps on the willows, the poplar trees. They hung their harps up. They said, we're not singing for joy. We're not going to do this. In like Christmas time, I love hearing my kids play Christmas songs on the piano. That instrument it creates an atmosphere of joy, and it's a symbol in my house. Kids playing piano is Christmas for the Myers, right? So imagine if I just said one Christmas, pack up the piano. We're not doing this year. I don't want anything that is going to allow us to even pretend that we're happy or that we're celebrating. That was the level of surrender that these guys had. It's just give up even trying. We hung up our harps because our captors, verse 3, demanded of us songs, and our tormentors demanded of us mirth. Right? And so what they were saying was, entertain us with those songs of victory that you guys like to sing. Sing us a little Psalm 118. Sing us a little Psalm 2. Oh, how the nations rage, but he who sits in the heavens laughs. Yeah, well, who's laughing now? Jews, right? And so they were apparently demanding that the Jews sing songs of victory in a position of defeat, salt in the wound, twisting the knife, insult to injury. He says, verse 4, how can we sing Yahweh's song in a foreign land? Which, very simply, these songs were created, like the Psalms of Ascent, for example. These songs were created for us to be singing as we're walking up the hill, going to the temple. This is just wrong. This is out of place, out of context. It's like singing Happy Birthday at somebody's funeral. What are we doing here? So verse 5, he says, if I forget you, O Jerusalem, may my right hand forget her skill. Literally, that means may my right hand get paralyzed. I want to not be able to play my guitar if I forget what God says is important. May my tongue cling to the roof of my mouth. That's picturesque. Anyway, so just moving on here, he asked God to remember the case of Israel against their enemies, and to hold it against them and to get revenge. Sometimes, by the way, praying for vengeance from the Lord is not a bad thing to do. It's not because we want people to suffer. It's not because we don't love our enemies. I'm speaking from a Christian perspective. he just asked their babies to get dashed against the rocks. We'll talk about that in a second. But as Christians, it's not that we don't love our enemies, but when we ask for God's justice and judgment, what we're saying is vengeance belongs to the Lord. I'm not taking it in my own hand, but it's about time that somebody does something. And there is no justice that I can bring to the table. So, Lord, I'm asking for it to come from you because you're the only source of true justice. That's a faithful prayer. You can pray that when it's time for that. So he says here, how blessed will be the one in verse 8, how blessed will be the one who repays you with recompense with which you have repaid us. How blessed will be the one who seizes, takes, and dashes your little ones against the rock. Okay, that one's tough for us. And let's realize here that what we're seeing here is a snapshot in time of somebody being honest with the Lord. This is not a model of a faithful prayer for the modern day Christian or something. This is somebody who has been through war and captivity and is apparently still in warlike mode where atrocities kind of make sense. And you need things like Geneva Conventions and you need things like international law in order to keep people from doing the stuff that comes into your mind during war. And so here's a person who's given that stuff voice and saying it to the Lord. This is honesty, right? This is not something that I would, as a Christian, understanding the blood of Christ and what I deserve and what God sacrificed for me, I wouldn't look at this and say amen, but I'm also not going to look at this person and say, watch your mouth, because this is somebody who feels they can be a lot more honest with God than I often feel that I can, right? we got to have our prim and proper prayers. And, you can't say anything in front of God that you wouldn't say in front of everybody else. That's not the way this guy thought. He was letting God have it. And it's fine. It made the Bible. This is in God's songbook that people are taught to repeat. So is it a good thing to pray for your enemy's babies to be dashed against the rocks? No. Is it a good thing that this guy said it out loud to God when he was thinking it? Yes. And is it a good thing that God put it in the Bible for us to learn from? Yes, absolutely. I'm just going to go ahead and assume, because I know the character of God, I'm going to assume that at some point in this person's life, the Lord ministered to his heart, and that thought was a snapshot in time and did not carry through and sustain to become his ultimate hope, right? His ultimate hope was to get back to Jerusalem. We can work forgiveness for our enemies. We can do all of these things. But it's okay that at noon on a Tuesday he hadn't gotten there yet, right? Like we're gonna give him some space to breathe and to vent. So, what's the good news in this? Well, the good news, the gospel to be found here, is simply that this psalmist realizes that there is still a Jerusalem there to be restored. In other words, our final hope is not where we are. Where we are may be a place of despair. Where we are may be completely devoid of any good news or salvation prospect or whatever. But where we belong, where we're going, that place is still good, protected by God, and God will see it happen. So for you and I, we've got all of these truths that we're not created for this place, right? Like even the church, in like Hebrews 13, for example, it calls, 12 and 13, it calls the church the heavenly Jerusalem, right? So like the gathering of God's people is kind of a foretaste of where we're going to be someday, but we're not there. 1 Peter 1 calls us the elect exiles. We're not at home. And so it can seem strange for us to go into a sin-filled world like the one you're driving into right now or whatever as you're listening to this, probably on a Monday morning. It can feel strange to go into these places where it's just absolute battle and spiritually draining and discouraging and things like that. And then to come to church on Sunday and be like, oh, victory in Jesus. Like, what victory? How are we going to sing the Lord's song in a foreign land? Now we get to look back at the cross, right? We get to look at the resurrection, the empty tomb, and those. We have a lot more promises of things to come than this guy had. But the sentiment can still exist. It's like, we just lost a baby and had a miscarriage, for example. I mean, I'm not saying us recently, but like, that's something that happens a lot. I just got diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease. My family member just had this horrible thing happen to him, or, I lost my job, whatever. And then we're supposed to come in and sing these happy, clappy, bouncy songs. It can feel like a bit of a mismatch sometimes. But the gospel is that the mismatch is temporary and that God has purchased for us realities that we can grasp onto and trust because they are unfading and reserved for us in heaven, right? So we can still sing about victory because not only has it been accomplished on the cross, proved in the resurrection, but it's also impending in the second coming. or at the moment of our death, whichever comes first, right? So to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord, and we will be. We will be like him. That's 1 John, chapter 3, I believe it is. When he appears, we will be like him. So we can sing songs of deliverance and songs of salvation, even when we're not currently experiencing the power that comes along with that and the goodness and the joy that comes along with that. It's okay. So what this psalmist was asking for, how can we sing songs of victory when we're in exile and when we're in defeat? What he was asking for, Jesus gave us the answer to. We can proclaim victory even while experiencing defeat. Welcome to the eternal gospel. It doesn't, it's not the world's way of thinking, but it is ours.